Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with a hot take about the homeless in San Francisco. Why am I talking about the homeless in San Francisco? Well, because it's a real problem. And a lot of people that come out of San Francisco, very lefty, shall we say, left, very woke, and they're on and on about how we should help those who are underserved, underprivileged. Exactly. Those who are poor and homeless. How do they serve them? How does the city of San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi's district, serve the homeless people? Well, according to an article in WND, San Francisco pays 16.1 million to shelter 300 homeless people in tents. That's a year, and that comes out to about $61,000 per tent. And I know what you're saying. I know it's an outrage, Joan. It's an outrage. So why don't you take a nap and think on that outrage? So when I saw this article, I didn't believe it. Now this is from WND, and they're aggregate a lot of times. They're aggregating from other sources, so it's at PJ Media. So I went to the PJ Media one. That's the article. But then I thought, well, PJ Media, they're very right wing, pretty right wing, I would say. So I thought, well, let me do a search. I use pre-search. I don't use Google anymore if I can help it. And I found this article in SFist. Looks like FS Fist. I don't know what. I guess it's supposed to be San Franciscoist, I guess. I don't know, but it's about in San Francisco. So I assume this is a left-leaning publication, and it seems to be true. I think PJ Media linked to this. In the 6, quote, safe sleeping villages set up by the city of San Francisco during the pandemic, the cost of maintaining a single tent campsite spot is $5,000 per month or $61,000 per year, more than it would cost to put each of these people in a market rate apartment in San Francisco. Okay, that's $5,000 a month. Even in San Francisco, that's way too high for an apartment. The insane cost of running these sleeping villages, which only have space for a total of 262 tents spread across the 6 sites, makes one immediately think of the criticisms that are leveled against the homeless industrial complex, as conservative commentators are eager to call it. See, this is a very lefty site. The revelation of the price tag for the tent program, $16.1 million for the year, came at a budget committee meeting on Wednesday, as the Chronicle reports via Abigail Stewart-Kahn, the interim director of Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. See, they have such a problem with homelessness in San Francisco. They have a Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. Apparently, supervisors have been operating under the assumption that this program, like the hotel program for the homeless, would get covered by FEMA reimbursement. It turns out it will not, though Stewart-Kahn said it does qualify as a group shelter. Well, that's good. The tent program, which has attracted its share of critics since the start of the pandemic, I wonder why, was quick and dirty response to the need to shutter indoor shelters across the city to prevent beer virus outbreaks. You don't want people sleeping on the street in a city where it's always like 70 degrees. But the numbers behind are bound to spark further debate about how the city addresses homelessness and how inefficient programs like this one are with money. How about all the programs in San Francisco? How about your poop program, your poop patrol that goes around picking up the poop of homeless people rather than solving the problem of homeless people pooping on the street, which would be to, I don't know, have some public bathrooms, would be cheaper, some porta potties, maybe stop spending $16.1 million on tents for 300 people. because I did a little more research, and I'm not a deep diver. I'm not like Sargon and the Lotus Eaters, but I found another apparently lefty publication, Curbed San Francisco, which is weird. San Francisco houses more homeless people than almost any other city, and yet it could and should do more. That's why you house so many homeless people, you dummies. But you don't house them, you tent them. And you tent them in the most inefficient and expensive way possible. And you don't even do it for all of them. It would be different if your insanely expensive program actually covered how many people were there. Take a ballpark guess of how many homeless people are in, let's see, in cities like San Francisco. The number of at-risk people in city provided housing is much higher than the number of homeless persons. You want to guess? Over 9,500 in all. So rather than 8,000 or so originally estimated, San Francisco should really be counting well over 17,000. So you got 8,000 people on the street and 9,500 in city provide housing already. And 300 of them have tents. So I guess if you were to multiply the 300, I say you would divide 300 into 17,000. Let's see, that would be, 1,700, and then divide that by 3, be about, I don't know, 500, let's say 530. And then you would multiply that by $16.1 million. You'd get about $6 billion. Is that right? Over, maybe? 6 billion, something like that. $6.3 billion. You could house everybody in those ridiculous tents. Now, getting back to the tents. oh no, this gets much better. This gets much better. Why? You might ask, why does it cost so much for the tents? Are they sleeping on bales of money? That might actually be more efficient. The program itself is giving temporary shelter to 314 people in 247 tents. Was it this one? Oh, okay. The cost boils down to $190 per night, which includes 24-hour security, bathrooms, maintenance, and 3 meals per day. This is cheaper than the per-day cost for the hotel program. But the hotel program is getting 100% federal reimbursement. Thanks, Biden, says the SFist. I don't know if they're thanking him ironically or not, quite frankly. But that's unsustainable too, in case you don't know it. Now, I don't know how much they're spending on hotels, my God. So, this is the cheap program they have, apparently. The cheap program that covers a little less, not even 250 people. So, and it's not being reimbursed. And that seems to be the crutch, or the crux of their argument of why it's bad in the lefty article. It's not that it's bad that they're spending $16.1 million. It's bad because they have to pay for it. You see, they would like the federal government to pay for it. So we all could pay for this insane, stupid program. That's how it works. See, in a Democratic administration, that's what's happening right now. See, they burned down all the cities and destroyed a bunch of things. And now that Biden's in, he's making it rain. And this is one of the things he's making it rain on. So let's think. What could one do with $61,000 if you were homeless? Sounds to me like you could move out of San Francisco and get yourself a nice place. So if I went to San Francisco, let's say, and I became homeless, and they just said to me, well, it's very sad you're homeless, Mr. DiGerolamo. The city wants to help you. Here is $61,000. To which I would go, thank you, and then move someplace cheaper. Because with $61,000, there are parts of the country you could buy a house for that. You know? And if you didn't buy a house, well, you could move somewhere where the rent was, you know, if you're not too picky, let's say $500 a month, something like that, $600. And you'd have a place. You'd have tens of thousands of dollars that burn through, and that would give you time to get a job and get your life in order. But you can't do it in San Francisco. I guess you could, because still you'd have more than enough to get an apartment for a year. It's just that you probably couldn't get a job in San Francisco if you were homeless. I guess you could get a job doing something, like car wash or something like that, but I don't think you'd be able to sustain the apartment you were in unless they kept giving you money. But that would be closer to, you could give them less money then, right? You could put those people in an apartment, and I'm not suggesting you do this. This would not be the libertarian solution at all, but you could, San Francisco, move all those 247 people into apartments, give them, let's just call it $50,000 just to make it even. Let them burn through that over the course of the year, save yourself some money, and then start working on other homeless people and getting them into apartments. And then maybe some of those homeless people would get back up on their feet. Because some of the homeless people in California, they're middle-class people who went broke. They lost their house, they lost their job, maybe they're addicted to drugs or alcohol or whatever. But you're just maintaining a tent city with 24-hour security, but it's only 247 people. You've got almost 17,000 people on the street. No, about 8,000. 8,000 to 9,000 people still on the street. The rest are in some kind of very expensive program. You could make a dent in it at least if you did that. You could at least cut the top off the budget and say, well, we got people in housing and got them off the street and saved us, a couple of $100,000. That would be a win. And you could go from there. And then you could realize, well, wait a minute. Maybe if we moved these people to a cheaper location and gave them $30,000, they could restart their lives or whatever. Or maybe we could just, build. $16.1 million. Couldn't you just build an apartment building and let these people live there? Couldn't you just build a place? You wouldn't even have to build it in San Francisco, which apparently is impossible to do. You could build it on the outskirts of the city or outside the city. Just pay for it. And then move everybody out there and say, hey, free apartment for a year. Get your life back together. Then maybe they would. And if they didn't, they'd at least be out of your damn city. Right? You'd at least be able to go, well, we tried. What is this? It doesn't make any sense. And quite frankly, if you have a Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing and a poop patrol, you have no intention of solving the problem. You want it to continue. Because the people in those jobs, what are they going to do if you actually solve the problem? What are you going to do if you build enough public toilets and you run the poop patrol and you make $70,000 a year living in San Francisco? Are you going to say, well, let's close it up? No. You're going to say, well, the poop patrol still provides an important service to the city. There's still people pooping on the street. Well, not as many, but still some. And it could start up again. That's what they would say. Same thing for the Secretary of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. Let's say you got all the homeless people off the street, or most of them, let's say 98% of them, and many of them are outside the city now. They're starting their lives. It's great. You're not going to have the secretary go, well, time to close up shop. You can fire me. No. They're going to say, oh, there's still people in trouble. We have to have preventive measures to keep people from going homeless, and that'll be my job now. That's the problem with government. And San Francisco is government run amok. Nobody wants to solve anything. Nobody wants to say, this program doesn't do anything. The only thing they want to defund is the police in San Francisco, which they just did to the tune of $120 million. So, they've got less police and more homeless. I mean, they're paying for 24-hour security at the tent shelters. Why? You just defunded the police to the tune of $120 million. If you're getting rid of the cops, why do you need security at the tents? Why not just do what you're going to do when you get rid of all the cops? Send counselors or crisis managers or whatever the hell you're going to do. Anyhow, I guess the motto of this entire story is don't ever move to San Francisco.